there are forces that lurk silently along the edges of sight, waiting for open minds to step through. When humorist Felix Pender crosses that threshold, only Dr. John Silence dares to face what has no face, but a will. Welcome to Chill Tales. This is A Psychical Invasion by Algernon Blackwood.
Felix Pender, a successful author and brilliant humorist, had always been able to conjure smiles and laughter through his clever play on words. Now, however, all trace of mirth had vanished from his face, and his eyes reflected nothing but a fathomless anguish. It was with that lost, imploring gaze that he met Dr. John Silence for the first time. That singular silent man who, with grave demeanor and mysterious wisdom, delved into matters others dismissed simply as nightmares. Seated in the doctor's study, in a discreet half-light, broken only by the flickering fire in the hearth, Pender let slip fragments of his torment, as a man might speak of the pain of someone else. In a low, trembling voice, he revealed how, in his house atop Putney Hill, an invisible, dark presence haunted him, poisoning his spirit and clouding the wellspring of humor that had once been the foundation of his literary success. "There is something in that house," he whispered, his voice nearly extinguished, "something that follows me everywhere, a kind of malevolent spirit I cannot see, yet feel drawing near like a funereal shadow." Silence listened without a word. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm, utterly free of surprise. "And do you believe," he said slowly, fixing the writer with a penetrating gaze, "that you know the cause, the origin point of this invasion?" The writer hesitated, then cast his eyes downward and answered, his voice tinged with both shame and terror. "I made a terrible mistake, Doctor. During one of my usual studies on the nature of humor and creativity, I foolishly took an experimental dose of cannabis indica. Since that moment, everything has changed." "I see," replied Silence, with grave gentleness, making a note. "The drug has opened the gates of your mind to supersensory awareness. You have become clairvoyant and defenseless before terrifying realities, utterly alien to the ordinary world." Pender shivered and lifted his tormented gaze. "Yes," he said in a trembling voice, "and I fear those doors can never again be closed." With tense and broken voice, Felix Pender recounted to Dr. Silence the onset of his terrible ordeal. After ingesting the cannabis indica, his perception of reality began to deform in grotesque and disturbing ways. Sounds and colors mingled. Minutes and hours flowed with an impossible, mocking rhythm, sometimes dilating into eternity, then compressing into frantic instants. All that had once been familiar became absurd. The house itself echoed with demonic laughter, chasing itself through the dark corners. "That night," Pender said, trembling, "I felt beside me an invisible presence, a malign being that laughed continuously, softly, as if mocking my fear. And from that moment, it has never left me." Though he had hoped the drug's effects would fade quickly, the dark presence lingered, embedding itself into his thoughts and his writing. What should have been humorous turned grotesquely perverse. His characters, once playful and innocent, transformed into sinister and malevolent creatures, animated by a dark, cruel irony. "When I reread those stories," he confessed in despair, "I realized it was no longer me writing. It felt as though another intelligence, malignant and cunning, was guiding my hand. I had to destroy those pages for fear anyone might see them." From a drawer, Pender pulled out several crumpled sheets and handed them to the doctor with a trembling hand. "These are the drawings I made under the drug's influence," he said bitterly. "I thought I was depicting the dark figure haunting me. But look for yourself." John Silence examined the sketches closely, but saw only chaotic, indecipherable scribbles. No recognizable image, only the ravings of a mind shattered by forces moving beyond human boundaries. "You are not mad, Mr. Pender," said the doctor, his gaze steady and serene. "You have fallen victim to a dangerous psychic invasion. The drug has unintentionally opened the gates of your mind to the astral world, allowing this dark force to enter and dominate your perceptions and creativity." Pender lowered his head with a long sigh, shaken by a deep chill. "You can be freed, I promise you that," added Silence with calm confidence. "But first, we must fully understand the nature of this invisible force that has entrenched itself in your soul." Dr. Silence, with his usual solemn composure, explained to Pender that what he was dealing with was no mere hallucination, but a manifestation of lingering forces, ancient and persistent in that house. "You have become clairvoyant," said the doctor, fixing his gaze upon the writer. "But sadly, you are a clairvoyant victim. The enhanced sensitivity granted by the hashish has made you vulnerable to the malignant influences still haunting this place." Silence revealed that within the house festered the dark energies of a powerful, wicked personality, of a woman who had once lived there. Her thoughts and malignant intentions, surviving death itself, had remained like a venom in the ether. Attracted involuntarily by Pender's open mind, those forces had infected his spirit, extinguishing every trace of peace and humor. "But what can I do, Doctor?" pleaded the writer. "I can't just abandon the house. I depend entirely on my work, and now I can no longer write." The doctor smiled kindly, his voice exuding a reassurance that calmed Pender to his core. "Don't worry, Mr. Pender. For now, the best solution is to vacate the house at once, but I shall deal with it myself. I need to spend a night or two within its walls to study the precise nature of these forces." "A night or two?" repeated Pender, anxiety sharpening his voice. "You intend to face that terrifying presence alone?" "Not quite alone," replied Silence with a subtle, enigmatic smile. "I shall be accompanied by two special assistants, a dog and a cat. They possess psychic sensitivity greater than that of many men, and they shall guide me in my investigation." Pender stared in astonishment, barely able to comprehend, yet profoundly reassured by the doctor's unwavering certainty. "You shall see, my dear friend," concluded Silence, rising and laying a friendly hand upon Pender's shoulder. "This invasion can be defeated. I assure you, your suffering will soon come to an end." With that promise, John Silence took his leave, preparing himself for the confrontation that awaited in the haunted house, resolved to free Pender's tormented soul from its invisible predator. Dr. Silence arrived at the house, cloaked in darkness and a bitter shroud of fog, accompanied by Flame, a strong-hearted collie, and Smoke, a mysterious black cat, whose silent steps and extraordinary perception made him a creature of eerie grace. The penetrating cold mixed with the oppressive silence of the night, forming an atmosphere heavy with foreboding, pregnant with unnatural things. From the very first step, the animals showed unmistakable signs of distress. Flame advanced hesitantly, ears flat, a low growl humming in his throat. He sensed something that still eluded his master. Smoke, on the other hand, moved with curious abandon, irresistibly drawn to the unseen presence saturating the air. His green eyes gleamed with a strange ecstasy, as though greeting a long-expected guest. As the fireplace cast its shifting light across the room, the dark presence began to manifest with growing intensity, bending the fabric of reality around them. Space and time warped grotesquely. The room expanded monstrously, and shadows crept with unnatural autonomy. Flame, overwhelmed by mounting dread, sought refuge behind his master, trembling. Smoke, in stark contrast, purred with strange delight, rubbing himself affectionately against something Silence could not see. At the height of the manifestation, John Silence himself was struck by a vision so dreadful it threatened to shake even his trained mind. Before his eyes, shrouded in a curtain of dark fog, appeared the terrible visage of a woman. Her face, deformed by centuries of hatred and spiritual corruption, embodied absolute malevolence. Her eye, half-lidded and gleaming with ancient spite, pierced into the doctor's consciousness, trying to invade and overwhelm him. As the hideous countenance pressed upon his spirit, Silence realized he stood at the epicenter of a violent battle between invisible forces of evil and the luminous strength of his own will. A contest that would decide not only his fate, but the lives of the frightened creatures beside him, and the soul of a house long contaminated by a legacy beyond the grave. Drawing from the deepest wells of his being, summoning every fiber of his formidable will, John Silence engaged in a silent battle against the entity that sought to consume him. With deliberate gestures and incantations spoken in a forgotten tongue, words that thrummed through the air with increasing power, Silence raised a barrier, not of the physical world, but a spiritual one, potent and pure. Using arcane knowledge, the result of years of occult study, he welcomed the destructive force into himself, only to reverse it, transforming it through a process of spiritual alchemy. The furious energy, once soaked in hatred and despair, was converted, bit by bit, into vibrations of harmony and peace that rippled across the room like a purifying tide. Gradually, the distortions of space collapsed. Shadows shrank back into their proper corners, and the heavy oppression in the air gave way to calm. Smoke, the black cat, abandoned his trance of unsettling ecstasy and returned with quiet assurance to his master's side. Flame, however, brave, loyal Flame, lay curled on the floor, shaken and dazed. When Silence knelt beside him, he discovered with deep sorrow that the dog's eyes were wide but vacant. Flame, struck by the psychic force of the battle, had gone temporarily blind. Despite this tragic price paid by his faithful companion, the battle was won. The house was freed from its dark occupant. The unnatural presence had been shattered and dissolved before the higher force of Silence's awakened spirit. Having moved into a new home, far from the shadows of Putney Hill, Felix Pender and his wife had finally recovered their long-lost peace. No longer oppressed by the sinister presence, the writer had seen his humor bloom again, and, with it, his pen regained its lightness and joy. In one final visit, calm and reassuring, Dr. Silence revealed the full truth about the psychic invasion. Through the help of his secretary and the use of a clairvoyant, he had discovered that the entity responsible had once been a woman of formidable and evil will, executed in 1798 for unspeakable crimes. A mistress of forbidden magic, her corrupted soul had left behind a residue so potent it lingered for more than a century, saturating the very air of the place where her acts had been committed. To confirm his words, silence presented Pender with an old etching, an image of the executed woman. Pender turned pale. He immediately recognized the twisted features and half-shut eye he had tried in vain to sketch under the drug's influence. The doctor explained that the drug had opened Pender's perception to the astral world, making him vulnerable to the dead sorceress's influence. As the weight of the revelation settled, the study door opened softly, and Flame trotted in. The collie, whose sight had been torn from him by the supernatural struggle, bounded joyfully toward his master. His eyes, now clear and bright, sparkled once more with old warmth. His return to sight symbolized the final triumph of light over darkness. And so, in the gentle warmth of a restored peace, the curtain fell at last upon the nightmare, and the shadows gave way to the serene dawn of a soul reclaimed.
Sometimes, horror doesn't arrive with screams, but with laughter no one wants to hear. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to Chill Tales and keep exploring the dark corners of the mind.